We are officially in football mode, guys. College football yesterday. Now we are officially in week 1 NFL season territory right now. So that means we got to be all in on week 1 fantasy football content right now. So we need to start out with the top 30 wide receiver rankings for week 1. And today, guys, we are going to do another hat giveaway. We've got our FFN white hat here. And all I need you to do is go down there in the comments and give me your hottest take for week 1 fantasy football. What is your hottest take for week 1? Put it in the comments below, and one of you will randomly win this particular hat. And let's just go ahead and get right into these rankings, man. The first tier of guys right here, this is in accordance with the top 3 of my rankings right here. We've got Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Tyreek Hill. Now, to start out with Justin Jefferson, there's really not much to talk about here. We're expecting the wide receiver 1 to have a great week 1 against a really bad Tampa Bay defense right here. Tampa Bay as a team is just simply not a very good team. My only concern with this particular matchup is that Minnesota gets up really early and just doesn't throw the ball that much. But regardless of what my concerns are, there's no way you're sitting Justin Jefferson, and he has to be here at number 1. And number 2, I've got Jamar Chase. Like I said, he is playing the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland on this particular weekend. Now, Jamar Chase, obviously, with Joe Burrow, there was a lot of concern early in the offseason about whether he was going to be ready for week 1 or not. Joe Burrow is expected to be ready for week 1. He said it himself. The coaching staff looks like he's going to be ready as well. So I wouldn't be worried about Jamar Chase in this particular matchup here. I know it's not the best matchup. The Cleveland Browns actually do have a pretty decent secondary, and they're all healthy now. But Jamar Chase week 1 against the Browns, I'm taking it all day. Now at number 3, Tyreek Hill, obviously going into Los Angeles to play the Chargers, man. I love this matchup. This is one of my favorite matchups of the entire week. We are looking at the second largest over-under of the week. The over-under is about 50 points, as you can see on the screen. This is going to be a high-scoring game right here. I am so looking forward to this. Just from a pure football standpoint, I think it's going to be a super fun game to watch. I think we're going to see a shootout right here. And there you go with Tyreek Hill. He's going to have plenty of big plays in this particular game. Now, moving down to tier 2 right here, this is where we see some rankings start to deviate from the season-long rankings that I just posted a couple of days ago. So number 4 here, I've got CeeDee Lamb going up against the New York Giants in New York this week. I love this particular matchup for CeeDee Lamb, man. The New York Giants were the number 15 defense in pass yards allowed last season. They didn't make too many moves in their secondary during the offseason, so I don't know exactly where they're going to be ranked, but I think it's going to be very, very similar to where it was last year. And I think this could be a very competitive game, honestly. I do think that the Giants will come out and give the Cowboys a really tough time this week, so I do think that they're going to have to continue to throw the ball throughout the duration of this game. And it's all clear to everybody. CeeDee Lamb is clearly the wide receiver 1 in this particular offense. I love this type of week for CeeDee Lamb. I think he's going to absolutely hog targets this week and be a very, very good wide receiver play. Now moving on to 5, I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. I love this matchup too. This matchup is spectacular for a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I expect this game to actually be a shootout. I think that this game is going to be a very high-scoring game. It's the largest over-under of the week. Vegas is expecting this to be a massive game as well. And the thing about Amon-Ra St. Brown is I expect Kansas City to win this game. And if my prediction comes true, I think Kansas City is going to get out to an early lead, which means that Detroit is going to have to play catch-up if that is actually what happens, and they will have to go to a game script that is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown-centric. Now, I think that's already the plan. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the best playmaker on the offense. Jahmyr Gibbs, yes, will have a role, but I think he's going to be capped to start the season. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think, is going to be the central focal point of this particular game plan right here. He should absolutely dominate targets this week. And number 6, I love this matchup. Probably my favorite matchup of the week is Chris Olave versus the Tennessee Titans. At home against the Tennessee Titans, I think this is going to be a fantastic wide receiver matchup. Tennessee was dead last in pass yards allowed last season. And the thing is, they really didn't make that many moves in their secondary this season to upgrade. So Tennessee, I think they're going to get thrown all over by New Orleans. When you look at what Derek Carr did in the preseason, he looked pretty good. He actually looked like a really good player. I love this matchup for Chris Olave. I think he's going to light it up this week, and you can absolutely fire up Chris Olave because he's going to get started really, really hot this season. Now, moving down a tier here, this is where we've got the tier of really great wide receivers who just have a little bit tougher matchups right here. So at 7, I've got Stephon Diggs playing the New York Jets in week 1. So Stephon Diggs obviously is a target hog on this offense. He's clearly the wide receiver 1. No doubt he's going to see 10 to 12 targets in this particular game. But this is the thing. He's going to be matched up with Sauce Gardner, and one of his 3 lowest scoring games last year came against the New York Jets. Because Sauce Gardner is a very good corner, I think this is going to be a tough matchup for Stephon Diggs, who wasn't that involved in the offseason. I don't think he needs to be, particularly because he's a veteran and he's a great player and he's got chemistry with Josh Allen already. You never sit Stephon Diggs, right? Like that's not the point of what I'm saying right now. But I do think that he will have a tough go of it in week 1. And I do think this could be a buy low situation based on what he does in week 1, because I do think that he will struggle this week. And I think that there's a lot of people who have questions about Stephon Diggs heading into the season already. So I do think this could be a buy low situation with Stephon Diggs after week 1. Now moving on to 8, I've got Garrett Wilson against the Buffalo Bills. Same matchup here. This is going to be a situation where I think it could be a shootout. I think this game could be an absolute shootout. When you see Buffalo's defense, their secondary is healthy again. They do have really good players in that secondary, so I do think it could be tough for Garrett Wilson this week. But the problem here with Buffalo's defense is their pass rush is going to be weak this week because they do not have Von Miller. We saw what happened last year with the Buffalo Bills defense, in particular when Von Miller left last year. They were totally a much different defense and a much worse defense than they were with Von Miller. So Von Miller being out is going to affect this right here. I expect Garrett Wilson to hog targets this week. I think he's going to have a great start to the season. I think this is going to be a great matchup here. And at number 9, I've got A.J. Brown against the New England Patriots. This might seem a little bit low for a guy like A.J. Brown, and I get it, man. A.J. Brown is a little bit of a concern for me this week. Now, of course, you never sit A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown does not go on your bench, but I do think he could have a similar week to a guy like Stephon Diggs. Obviously, he's Philadelphia's best weapon. There's no question about that. The chemistry with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown is palpable. Everybody could see it. But the problem is that Bill Belichick is known for taking away your number 1 option on offense. That is what he is known for. Now, granted, he hasn't been as good at that over the past 2 years specifically, but that is still what he is known for. And New England's defense is going to be very good this year. Their pass rush is very stout. I do think it's a situation where Philadelphia's top-rated offensive line will be able to handle the pass rush. So always start A.J. Brown. Like I said, don't ever sit A.J. Brown, but I do think that this may not be his best week in week 1. Now, at number 10, I've got Devontae Adams taking on the Denver Broncos in Denver this week. There's multiple layers to this particular ranking right here. Obviously, clear wide receiver 1. Clear target hog on this offense. I love Devontae Adams. I've been higher on him than consensus this offseason. But this particular matchup, the secondary is very, very tough. Pat Surtain is not an easy corner to go up against, and I do think that he will give Devontae Adams a little bit of issues this particular week. And it's also hard to know what exactly we're going to get from Jimmy Garoppolo week 1, so I do think that there are some potential issues here with Devontae Adams, but Devontae Adams, still a top-tier talent, still rated as one of the best wide receivers in the game by fellow players, coaches, and executives. Devontae Adams is going to be just fine, just may not be his best week of the season. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Cooper Kupp at number 11 here, taking on the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle this week. It's really hard to slot out Cooper Kupp right now. I am filming this on Saturday right now, and we do not have word on whether Cooper Kupp is going to play. I've seen it's 50-50 shot if Cooper Kupp plays or not. Thing about Cooper Kupp, if he plays, he definitely belongs in the top 12. There's no question about it. He's too important to this offense. He's going to get his if he does play. He still may be limited, though, if he does play. I expect him to be limited if he does play, actually. But the matchup versus Seattle is not a bad matchup here, and I still do expect Cooper Kupp to be the focal point if he does play. That's just the reality of the Los Angeles Rams offense. Now, at number 12, I've got Amari Cooper against the Cincinnati Bengals this week. So I think Amari Cooper is going to be a very good fantasy wide receiver this year. I've said it this offseason. I called him a must-draft player earlier in the offseason. I think Amari Cooper is going to be very, very good in fantasy this season. Think about Amari Cooper. I think he's going to start very well as well. This is a matchup that he took advantage of last year at home with 22 fantasy points last year in their particular game. We all know how good Amari Cooper is at home versus his performance in away games. The good thing here is that Cleveland is hosting Cincinnati in this game. He's the clear #1 wide receiver in this offense. I think the first full year with Deshaun Watson is going to start out pretty good for those two guys right here. At number 13, I've got Keenan Allen against the Miami Dolphins, hosting the Miami Dolphins. Again, I think this matchup is fantastic. I think you want every piece of this wide receiver core in this particular offense. You want to start guys like Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. You want all of those guys in this team. I expect this to be a complete shootout, and I expect Justin Herbert to throw at least 35 to 40 passes in this particular game. Keenan Allen will get at least 10 to 12 of those targets in particular as well. Now, 14 is going to be Jalen Waddle here in the same matchup. Again, part of this massive shootout game, I think, is going to be Jalen Waddle is definitely going to hit on a couple of big plays in this particular game. Jalen Waddle, always a must start, especially in this type of week. Now at 15, I've got T. Higgins against the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. So T. Higgins, expect T. Higgins to do well this week. I'm not worried about T. Higgins, really. He had 6 targets versus Cleveland last year, but he did miss one of those games due to injury. It was one of those games where he was active and he played a couple snaps, but he spent most of the game on the sidelines. T. Higgins coming into the season healthy. There's really not too much to worry about here with T. Higgins. Now dropping down to our next tier, this is kind of our first tier of real uncertainty about these particular guys here. So at 16, I've got Deebo Samuel in Pittsburgh taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. So the good thing on Deebo Samuel's side is he's coming in healthy, and Brock Purdy is officially the starter. So they have clarity on who the quarterback is, and they have one of their top offensive playmakers coming into the season healthy. That's good for Deebo Samuel. The matchup is also not too bad. Pittsburgh secondary is really not as good as everybody thinks. Their corners are definitely going to struggle this year. They've got an older corner in Patrick Peterson, and they've got a very unproven corner in Levi Wallace. So I don't think the matchup is really bad at all. I expect Deebo Samuel to hit on a couple big plays in this game, and I think he's just fine here at number 16. Now, at number 17, I've got DK Metcalf versus the Los Angeles Rams in this matchup. So I will say, with the Seattle Seahawks wide receivers in particular, these rankings are based on my intuition that Jackson Smith-Njigba won't play. I don't think he plays. He may play. He may very well play. He's already practicing fully again after the wrist surgery. He may not play. I am leaning on the side that he's going to sit out this week. I just don't think that they would win much if they played Jackson Smith-Njigba if he is still hurt. So I do think that he will probably sit in week 1, in which case DK Metcalf is going to do very well in this particular game. I think Seattle's going to crush the Los Angeles Rams this week. I think it's going to be a complete blowout and not even fun to watch. The only concern I have with that particular game script is I do think that Seattle will crush them, and they will crush them early. So there may not be as many targets this week, but DK Metcalf is absolutely a must start. At number 18, I've got Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Carolina Panthers at home. So this is honestly the most interesting matchup of the week to me in multiple ways. I mean, obviously, Carolina's got Bryce Young starting. Atlanta's got Desmond Ridder starting for the first time. There's so many uncertainties. Like I said, Atlanta with the new quarterback. Carolina was number 23 in pass yards allowed in 2022. But I think their defense is going to be improved this year. I don't think they're going to give up that many pass yards this season. Kyle Pitts is coming into the season healthy and ready to go as well in week 1. I still think that Drake London will be the clear dominant number 1 wide receiver in this offense, and I do think he will lead the team in targets at this point, and I would start him particularly. If I have him on teams, and I've got him on several redraft teams, I'm planning to start Drake London this week, but it is a little bit hard to tell, and that's what makes this matchup so particularly interesting to me. Now moving on to 19, I've got Devonta Smith against the New England Patriots in New England. Like I said, it might sound a little bit low on this particular ranking. I think this is going to be a very tough matchup, though. I do think that New England will come out swinging, and their defense is going to play a very, very good game. And I'm worried that Philadelphia may start a little bit slow in this particular game against New England. Coming off the Super Bowl hangover here, who knows how they're going to start out in New England. Devonta Smith averaged 8 targets a game last year in 2022. He's going to be extremely involved in this offense. He's still a must-start start type of guy. You don't put Devonta Smith on your bench, but he just may have a little bit of a tough week in week 1, very similar to AJ Brown. Now moving down to our next tier here, I've got DeAndre Hopkins at 20 going to New Orleans to take on the Saints here. So here's the thing about DeAndre Hopkins. You can absolutely expect DeAndre Hopkins to be the wide receiver 1 in this Tennessee Titans offense. I don't think it's going to be particularly close. I do think that Treylon will be way more involved this year than he was last year, and I do think Treylon will have his games because DeAndre Hopkins will open things up for Treylon Burks. But I do think that with the uncertainty of Treylon Burks' status, he is expected to play this week, but he is coming off a knee injury, which he missed a lot of weeks. So I think clearly this particular week, DeAndre Hopkins is going to dominate in targets immediately. New Orleans is a tough matchup, though. That's the thing about New Orleans defense. They were number 2 in passing yards allowed in 2022. Marshawn Lattimore is not an easy matchup for any wide receiver. That's the reality here with the New Orleans Saints defense, but I still do consider DeAndre Hopkins to be an absolute start this week. At 21, I've got Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers going to Chicago to take on the Bears. Also, this is one of the more fascinating matchups for me to watch this week. It's probably the second most fascinating matchup to watch this week in my particular opinion, because this team has so many uncertainties as well. They've got a new quarterback, Jordan Love, coming in. We have no idea what to expect with a guy like Jordan Love. Literally no idea what to expect with him. We have not seen this guy play enough at all in the past several seasons. So it's going to be very fascinating to watch that aspect as well. It's also interesting to note that reports over the offseason were that Jordan Love actually really preferred to throw to Romeo Doubs. That was particularly his favorite target this offseason. Now, once we get into games, who knows if that actually holds up. I think Christian Watson is absolutely the better talent here between him and Romeo Doubs, and I expect Christian Watson to be the wide receiver 1 in this particular offense. But Chicago should be an improved team this year. I do think Chicago will be an improved team all around, and I do think that you should be starting Christian Watson. It's just a little bit hard to project him very similarly to Drake London, and that's why he's kind of down here at number 21. Now, 22 and 23, I have got Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley back-to-back, and they are both going to the Indianapolis Colts to take on the Colts. So obviously, I said it earlier this offseason. I said it just a couple days ago when I had my wide receiver rankings video. I'm going to have these guys back-to-back until one of them separates from me, because they are so close to me right now on who will be the wide receiver 1. We've got Christian Kirk, wide receiver 11 last year, on a big contract. Over half of the value of his contract is guaranteed. But we've also got a player, Calvin Ridley, who at one time was better than Christian Kirk has ever been. So they're very close to me in my rankings right now. They will continue to be close until one of them separates. And it could be as soon as week 1. But it might not be as soon as week 1, because I think that Jacksonville is absolutely going to breeze by Indianapolis this week. This should be an absolute cakewalk game for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So we may not see a very pass-heavy game script for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think they get out to an early lead. I think they maintain the lead, and I think they're going to dominate the Indianapolis Colts this week. At number 24, I've got DJ Moore taking on the Green Bay Packers at home. Again, very hard to predict this one because Chicago, like Green Bay, has a lot of changes as well. I mean, he's the clear wide receiver 1 on this team. Nobody's disputing that. But this is a tough matchup here against the Green Bay Packers. Jair Alexander is a very tough go for any wide receiver in this league. So I think it's going to be a very tough matchup here for DJ Moore on the brand new team, on the brand new offense. And Chicago was also dead last by a wide margin in total passing yards last year. They ran a 1980 style offense last year. They barely had any passing yards. So I do think that they will improve this year. The question is how much, and the question is how high is DJ Moore's ceiling with those type of numbers. Now I've got Mike Evans at 25, and they are going to Minnesota to take on the Vikings here. I said it a couple of weeks ago about Mike Evans and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a team. The only one player on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers I have any interest in fantasy football for is Mike Evans. Mike Evans does have some good things on his side. Obviously, he's consistently a 1,000-yard type of receiver. He has never had a finish worse than 1,000 yards in his career as far as receiving yards go. And Baker Mayfield does have a good deep ball. That is one of the few strengths that he has as a player. And Minnesota was second to last in passing yards allowed last year. So their secondary is not exactly a good one. So I do think this could be a matchup that Mike Evans could take advantage of. And I do think that he could have a very hard start to the season. And it might be a situation where you might want to sell high on Mike Evans if you do have him on your team after week 1. I do think this could be a very good game for Mike Evans. So it might be a sell high type of situation after week 1. Now at 26, I've got Mike Williams of the Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Miami Dolphins. Again, love the matchup. I've said it several times throughout this video. This is a fantastic matchup to take advantage of for fantasy football purposes. Now, it's always hard to project a guy like Mike Williams week to week. He's simply one of the biggest boomer bust players in all of fantasy football. But like I said, the matchup here is just so great. You cannot pass up on this type of matchup. You want to start all wide receivers in this matchup right here. Now at 27, I've got Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks taking on the Los Angeles Rams. So Tyler Lockett, the thing about him is when you look at last year, he dominated the Rams last season. He had 23.3 fantasy points for the first time that he played the Rams last year, and he had 13.4 fantasy points for the second time. Like I said when I was talking about DK Metcalf, the only concern I have here in this particular game is that there's a large possibility to me that Seattle just crushes Los Angeles early and they just keep their foot on their necks the entire game and they don't have to throw the ball that much. And also the outside shot that Jackson Smith-Njigba does play in this game. But to me, Tyler Lockett is a pretty easy start this week if you've got him on your fantasy team. Now, Jahan Dotson is going to be number 28 here, moving down to the last tier, and they are taking on the Arizona Cardinals at home. I've said this one all off season. I think Jahan Dotson is going to be a better fantasy player this year than Terry McLaurin is. I truly do believe that. And I think we're going to see it right out of the gate in week 1. This is an excellent matchup here. Taking on possibly the worst team in the NFL. This is going to be a cakewalk for Washington. Now, I do think it's worth noting, I still don't think that his ceiling is as high as other players just due to his quarterback situation. But I will say that over the offseason and in the preseason games, Jahan Dotson and Sam Howell definitely look to have some pretty decent chemistry there. So I think this is going to be a good game for Jahan Dotson. It's going to be an easy matchup for the Washington Commanders as a team. Now at 29 here, I've got Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. Courtland Sutton is on here for one reason and one reason alone. He looks to be the clear wide receiver 1 this week. Jerry Jeudy looks like he is not going to play in this game. So that means that someone is going to benefit from Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson and the Broncos as an offense, I think are going to be improved this year with Sean Payton. And Las Vegas is also a pretty good matchup here. So Courtland Sutton, I think this may be his best week in fantasy football. This would be the only week I think I would see myself saying that you could start Courtland Sutton. Now at number 30, to round out the top 30, I've got Brandon Ayuk taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. I think Brandon Ayuk's going to get plenty of work this week against Pittsburgh. I think it's honestly going to be a pretty competitive game. I think San Francisco will have to continue to throw the ball because I do think this will be a competitive game in Pittsburgh. And while I do think that the game script could be a run-heavy game script because that's how San Francisco plays football, Pittsburgh's strength on defense is their run defense. So I do think that Brandon Ayuk could hit on a big play or two, but I do think this will be more of a Deebo Samuel type of week than it will be a Brandon Ayuk type of week. So let me know in the comments how excited you are for week 1 fantasy football, and let me know what you think of the rankings as well. And if you want to see some players that you can sell high on before week 1 fantasy football, click on this video right here.